I'm Anna. I'm a medical student at University of Washington in Seattle, and I'd like to present to you today on the female athlete triad. Now, you're probably wondering why I think it's an important subject, and just to give you a little background, when I was in about 3rd grade, the boy next to me in the lunch line looked at me and told me that he was going to beat me in the mile. And not only was he going to beat me, but he was going to beat everybody in the entire class, and probably everybody in the entire school. And so I took that as a challenge, and I went home and had my dad mark out a mile-long course around the neighborhood. And I started my training that day, and I'm still training to this day. And in my running career, while I was in high school, I kind of dabbled in the female athlete triad myself. And so I know that it's a real thing and that it has real effects on people. And so I just wanted to share some of the data with you guys. Now, the female athlete triad, if I had to sum it up and really just sort of dumb it down to its most basic idea, I would say that it is not taking in enough energy to allow you to sustain your athletic performance and your basic requirements of daily living and thriving. So it's not having enough energy to do everything that you need to do in your busy. Hey guys, you must be here to hear my presentation on the female athlete triad. Well, I just got home from the gym and I was actually starting to work on my budget for the month, but since you're here, maybe I can find some clever segue between the two. Okay, so first I'll start with just what I was doing for my budget for the month, okay? So I'm a medical student and I'm a pretty responsible medical student. So what I like to do budget-wise is I get my student loan check at the beginning of the month, okay? So here it says $2,000, that's my income for the month. And then what I like to do is basically pay off all of my bills just first thing, that first day of the month. That way I make sure I have enough to cover those things. So for me, the biggest thing is my rent, because I think, well, if I pay my rent, then at least I know I live here in Montana. At least I'll have a roof over my head and I'll be safe from the elements, you know, and that'll probably help me and my chances of survival pretty well. So I always pay my rent on the first day of the month, so I just write that check right out of the gates. Okay? Now the next thing I have to pay for, bills-wise, are these things like gas and food and the telephone, okay? So they're a little bit less important than my rent, but gosh, like, I sure like to eat. And I work pretty far from where I live, so like it definitely helps to have some gas money to get me there. And my mom always looks forward to my calls on Sunday afternoons, so she'd probably be pretty mad if I didn't pay my phone bill. So altogether, those bills come to about $700 for me. And while it's not entirely necessary that I pay any of those things, it sure does make my life a lot nicer. Okay, so I have my $2,000 that I start with. I pay $1,000 in rent and $700 for extra bills. Okay, and that's me being responsible and getting all that stuff taken care of first. And what I have left is $300, okay? And what I do with that money is my business. So that's what's left over just for me after I've paid off all of my debts. And, you know, maybe this month I'll take the money and go to a Macklemore concert. I don't know, but the point is that this money is mine to do with whatever I please. Make sense? And now we've thoroughly gone over my budget, but to tie in the female athlete triad, let's look at it from the body's perspective, okay? So I like to imagine that the human body is a very organized, finely tuned, sophisticated entity, much like a medical student, okay? And that it would organize its calorie budget in much the same way I organize my money budget. So I've changed a few things here. So instead of dollar signs, you'll now see kilocalories, which is just a fancy way of saying calories. Okay, and instead of 2,000 calories of income, I've changed it to intake. So this is what you're getting through your diet, is 2,000 calories, okay? And then 1,000, we'll say, of that, instead of going towards rent, like I would do, is going to go towards survival. So this is the amount that your body wants to pay right out of the gates, because if it doesn't, you're not going to make it very far. So that would be calories going towards keeping your heart beating, keeping your lungs breathing, keeping your mind sharp and conscious, providing enough energy to your kidneys and to your intestines so that you can absorb nutrients as well as excrete waste products, okay? So if any of those things didn't get the calories they needed to keep going, you wouldn't make it very far or very long, okay? So that's sort of like the rent of the body, all right? And then you have these other kind of smaller bills that we talked about with my budget. Whereas instead of being like the phone bill and the gas bill and the grocery bill, okay, for the body it's more like the bills that you need to thrive. So it's reproduction, okay, it's healing, it's growth, all right? So you guys are all in high school and you haven't reached the peak of your growth potential for most of you. So you're still building bones, okay? You're still getting taller, you're putting on a little bit of mass, okay? So you are growing individuals and you need energy for that. Let's see. The healing, if you even got a sunburn, it would take energy to heal it. If you were to break a bone, it takes energy to heal that, okay? So you need to have some energy set aside for healing. And then the reproduction, that's just one of many things you need energy for, but it's important for the survival of the species, okay? So that is your intake, your surviving, and your thriving, okay? So if you were the smart body and the wise body, what you would do is you would pay for the survival first, and then you would pay for the thriving second. And so you take 2,000 minus 1,000 minus 700, and what you would get would be 300. And that would be 300 kilocalories left for, we'll say in your case, exercise. So your body would gift you with 300 calories and say, this is how much you have to exercise on today. Okay, and that would be the body's preference. All right. Now, I do need to stop and say that these numbers I'm giving you, I have left the same as my budget to make a point, but this is not the number of calories that I'm saying that you need, okay? So these are just the numbers I've used to make a point, all right? So, being the smart, competitive, high-performing athletes that you are, you're probably saying, well, 300 calories for a workout, that's probably not going to cut it for what I'm doing. So, because you're who you are, you can kind of hit the override button on what your body would normally do, okay? And so instead of taking care of these basic survival kind of thriving functions first, you might go ahead and throw in a hard workout before all of that stuff gets done, okay? So here's what we'll say happens. We'll just say that you haven't done all these things yet, and you go out and you bust out a 1,000 calorie workout. Okay? So there's your 1,000 calorie workout. And now what are you left with? Well, now you have 0 calories left over. And you haven't done any of those things we talked about for thriving. So healing, growth, reproduction, anything like that, okay? And so now your body's in a conundrum. And basically, being the scrappy body that you have, it starts to loot, okay? So it looks to the fat and starts pulling energy out of fat, and it looks to the muscle and starts pulling the energy out of the muscle. It looks to your bones, and it actually starts pulling some of the energy and the nutrients out of your bones, okay? So your body is going to come up with the energy in some way if it doesn't have the calories to use right off the bat, okay? Meanwhile, while all of this looting is going on, your body's kind of like analyzing the situation, and it's like, holy cow, like I am in a state of stress, like there's a crisis going on inside of here, and we're just going to start shutting stuff down. And so one of the first things that it looks at is reproduction, and it's like, well, we're having a crisis, like this is hardly the time to be putting our energy towards reproduction. And so how that shows up in the body is you might have changes in your menstrual cycle, okay? Either fewer menses or just the absence of them altogether, okay? So what I've basically illustrated for you in this budget analogy is the female athlete triad, okay? So what you could take away from this is that you do not have enough energy to maintain all of the functions of your body, include building bones and having healthy reproduction, okay? And then you could either attribute it to too much exercise or too many calories consumed in exercise, or too little calories taken in the first place, okay? And that's kind of the foundation for talking about the female athlete triad.